Fascinating stuff, Bart. Thanks so much for sharing this stuff. Have you heard of the Comrades ultra marathon that we have over in South Africa?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this, but Tim Noakes told us that the coach who trained the people who finished first, second, and fourth, and the people who finished first and second both sort of beat the previous record this year.
Okay.
They were all, by the way, on, or the coach, I don't know, because they're not saying things publicly.
Yeah.
But the coach is an advocate of purely carnivorous diets, and the participants were filmed, eating steaks, the day of the race or the day before the race or whatever it may have been. Do we have more evidence about elite athletes who are using this way of eating as a boost? There's a rumor that the All Blacks were using.
I was involved in a cursory way with the All Blacks preparation for the 2011 World Cup, which they won. And I can tell you that at that time, at least, so over a decade ago now, there were at that time 3 current All Blacks who were carnivore and who were not singing it from the rooftops and telling everybody about it. Precise reason being, number one, they could do without the pushback from people. Tough rugby players can't handle a bit of lip. And secondly, they felt that it was giving them such a performance boost, such a boost in their energy and their power and their strength and their explosiveness on the rugby field, that they wanted to keep it to themselves. They didn't want others to know about it. And I can also tell you that having been involved with a number of both sub-elite and actually elite professional sports people and people in highly physically demanding physical occupations such as military, policing, firefighting, etc., that the carnivore diet is more highly represented there in the top performing athletes and participants than we are led to believe, precisely for that reason. This is these people's secret source, if you like, their performance boost, and they want to keep it to themselves. So of course they're not singing it from the rooftops. The same is true of training at an appropriate intensity and reducing the volume vastly. People say to me all the time, what do you know? Well, actually, I'm a well-published exercise physiologist, so I do know a bit about it with a couple of decades of experience teaching it at university level. Secondly, I've dealt with elite athletes myself professionally over the same sort of about 20-year period, and I am acquainted with quite a few of them who are doing things that you don't know about. But these people will still come to me who maybe have done some running and say, oh, there are no serious runners in the world who don't train for volume at low intensity in zone 2. What are you talking about? This is the way to do it. It's always been done that way. All the coaches are saying it should be done that way, so it must be right. Well, number one, just because this is the prevailing idea in exercise physiology about how it should be done doesn't mean that is actually correct or optimal. It's just what holds sway. And secondly, the assertion that there are no serious world competitive athletes who are training at the right intensity and volume is false. There are. They're just not telling you about it. Why would they?
It's funny because I was trying I can't remember what I was trying to do. I think a client asked me a question and I was trying to research how Usain Bolt trained. And what I found was that all of the videos, I couldn't find any interviews of him talking about how he trained until after he was no longer sort of interested in running a specific event competitively, right? So he only talked about how he trained for, say he broke the record for the 200 meters only after he stopped competing for that particular length of race was he willing to talk about how he trained for it.
Obviously.
And now, whatever he's running for now, he's not going to tell you about how he trains for that. So it's I think you're 100% right that this is all sort of closely guarded secrets.
Absolutely. But I mean, the other thing we must not forget here is, once again, while Mo Farah has some genetic gifts predisposing him to being very, very successful in medium to long distance endurance running, Usain Bolt has a pretty good hand for being a sprinter, genetically up front. So there is nothing I could do, even in my prime many decades ago, that I could have done to match Usain Bolt. There is no opportunity for me to get anywhere near him because that's just genetically disallowed for me. So again, we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Sure. Genetics and training are both going to play a massive role in this. Bart, we only have about 5 or 6 minutes left for this discussion. I wanted to ask you a couple of things that were really sort of playing devil's advocate, because what we hear from a lot of people, to be honest, I think the naysayers kind of know that they're losing these days, and their arguments are getting more and more silly. But there are a couple of arguments that I do think it would be worth at least mentioning, if not debunking fully.
Yeah.
Yes, we have the example of cultures who ate a lot of meat and who were sort of meat-based, but they weren't Almost all of them. We can argue about the Maasai warriors, but maybe with that exception, even the Inuit were trading and trying to get some plants into their diet to supplement their diet of whale and seal blubber and so on. What do you make of that argument?
I wasn't there. I don't know for sure. I can't say, well, that's absolute rubbish. No, not at all. I suspect that Inuit were trading with people from further south, and I suspect one of the things that they did trade was an amount of plant material of some kind. It seems pretty clear from all the archaeological, anthropological, and genetic studies that there is a clear population-wide knockout of a certain set of genes which lead to a number of adaptations physiologically to both cold and carbohydrate-devoid diets over millennia and millennia. So that's where I would start my attention. Any of these kind of hearsay things, people were doing this, people were doing that, people were eating this, people were eating that, fine. Believe what you want. But at the end of the day, what we need to get past, I think, is this cognitive dissonance of mindlessly regurgitating this idea that human beings are well adapted for plant intake. And in fact, that's optimal, and we don't need any animal material at all. We can live very well on plants, because that's nonsense. That's 180 degrees out of phase with the objective reality in which we find ourselves. If we look on a population basis at human beings, we find that those on a plant-based diet suffer. It destroys their health sooner or later, at large. Now, there are one or two outliers who are able to withstand such self-abuse for years before they actually finally do crap out in a major way, sure. But all we can do really when we're talking to people about the likelihoods of the masses is to talk about the middle range with an understanding in mind of how variable the data is around the mean to give us an idea of its power of prediction, because that's usually poor as well. That's for another day. At the end of the day, it looks, when you look at the human system objectively and with actual science as your illumination rather than theology, what you will see is that the human body is very, very well adapted to a diet consisting of the muscle meat and associated flesh of large ruminant animals mostly. And other animals can be added in, of course, for variety. A balanced diet of animals. That's what you need. About 80% beef is great, it seems, for most people, and 20% everything else seems to be an ideal diet. Muscle meat, again, let's focus on that. It's muscle meat we're talking about here, not organs. Absolutely, you can eat some organs if you like in a small amount. You don't need to, and certainly don't overdo it with things like liver, because there can be some very serious issues if you do. We're not designed for that. That's not our evolutionary path. We evolved on eating the muscle meat largely. So that's what you should do.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm trying to finish a short article about Homo erectus, one of our ancestors, and how it sort of co-evolved with mammoths and mastodons. Homo erectus was probably our most successful ancestor. They were there for a whole long period of time, and they really, wherever you find Homo erectus, you find these elephantine bones, mammoths and mastodons, and so on, depending on where the population was. So it's fascinating that different species co-evolve with each other, so, the ruminants and the grasses and so on. It seems like we at least partly co-evolved, not just with ruminants, but also with like elephants. Fascinating.
Well, humans would have followed the herd of mastodon around.
Yeah.
Of course they would.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, the herd's on the move again. Let's move our camp so that we're near enough that we can strike out and take down a mammoth when we need one.
For sure. And then you think about how many people those things were much bigger than modern elephants.
Sure.
You think about how many people that could feed. Wow, that's a whole lot.
Yeah.
Bart, it's been a pleasure as always. I think we better call it here.
All right.
Look forward to chatting. Hopefully it won't take us another year, but look forward to chatting again soon.
Right. I'll have my people contact your people in due course. These are my people, of course. Ted, you're acquainted with Ted. He's in charge. Right. We'll talk to you soon.
Fantastic, man. Love to Ted and all of yours.
Ciao.
See you soon.
All right.